Good evening and welcome to Artist Talk on Art on Monday, April 24th, 2023. I'm Doug Shear, A2A President. We're now in our 49th year. Founded in 1974, A2A is the art world's longest running and preeminent forum. Our archive resides at Archives of American Art of the Smithsonian, and next month we'll be adding to our collection there, bringing our total archive to more than 1,000 recorded events featuring over 8,500 artists. Comments made by our presenters do not necessarily reflect those of A2A. May 1st, we will feature Mongolian artist Zaya Saikan Sambu, interviewed by the critic, author, and historian Gail Levin. And you might want to join us on Monday, May 8th, for an interview by me of the photography critic and author A.D. Coleman on his long career as a critic, author, and commentator. That's the 8th at 7 p.m. The event tonight is a dialogue between noted collage artist Joan Ffolliett and the photographer Charles Purvis, and is being captured and delivered via Zoom and recorded there. That recording will be posted to our YouTube channel in a few days. A2A retains copyright of its recordings. The same recording will later become part of the permanent archive of A2A at Archives of American Art of the Smithsonian. Please reserve your questions or comments until the latter part of the presentation and use the chat function, which you should find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. From 1985 until 2006, Charles Purvis freelanced as an advertising photographer in New York City, creating groundbreaking imagery for a wide variety of internationally known clients. In addition to commercial assignments, he's created a large body of innovative work inspired by a relentless curiosity and desire to uncover the creative potential of camera, light, and film. Purvis shares his skills and experience with artists and photographers through individual mentoring, group facilitation, and creativity coaching. Charles.
Oh, yes. Hello.
You're on.
Thank you for that introduction, Doug. And now it's my honor and pleasure to introduce Joan Ffolliett, artist, educator, and designer. And welcome. How are you this evening, Joan?
I'm good, thanks.
Good.
How are you?
I'm well, yeah. Beautiful lights fading, evening's starting to come on. So why don't we just start at the beginning? I'm just curious if you could tell us a little bit about what brought you to art, to practice art, to create art. A little bit about the origin story.
Well, first, I'd like to thank everybody for showing up and being interested. Welcome to the interview. The origin story is I was lost until I found art, basically. In a nutshell, as a young person, I had very little direction in my life, and I went to college after high school, kind of half-assed, and didn't have any kind of real direction, had no understanding of what I wanted to pursue in my life. And with a couple of major pit stops along the way, in my mid-20s, I ended up at the University of Washington in Seattle and taking foundation studies courses, 2-dimensional design and 3-dimensional design. And really, like a light bulb went off. I just understood that visual, the visual language could actually be a language, right? You could communicate with that. And not only could you communicate with the visual language, but you could say things that you cannot say in words, or verbal language, or written language. And that that was way before therapy, but I think it was tapping into something that I needed to be able to express, and I didn't know any other way to do it. So that's the basic origin story.
Okay. So you got your BFA at the University of Washington?
I did, in sculpture, and the whole time I did printmaking, even though it was not my major. So I was really focused on sculpture.
And then you went on to Rhode Island School of Design to get
Yep.
your master's?
Yeah, in sculpture as well.
In sculpture as well. Okay.
Yeah.
And did you teach there or work there?
I did, yeah. I taught there for about 10 years.
And what did you teach?
Oh boy, I taught I taught foundation studies, so 2-dimensional design, 3-dimensional design in their freshman foundation courses, welding, casting, sculpture, summer studies, continuing education, drawing, a lot of stuff.
Welding, that's pretty awesome. Do you still weld?
I haven't welded for a very long time,
Okay.
but yeah, I wish I had a welding setup, but I don't have one at home.
Yeah, that's great. Well, would you like to look at some images?
I would like to look at some images.
Okay, let me see how I can do this. I'm going to do some screen sharing. Okay. So,
So I just wanted to also add that while I did teach at RISD in a number of different classroom settings, I've taught at a number of other schools as well, and including currently I'm teaching at Ulster County Community College and the Woodstock School of Art. And in the fall, I'll start teaching at RNF Fine Paints in Kingston. And I do workshops for various other organizations as they come about. So I've continued to teach, so.
can I ask you a little bit about teaching, your experience of teaching?
Sure.
So what is it that draws you to teaching? What is it that excites you about it?
The most exciting thing about teaching is getting people, particularly young people, to think about the things that they see and the things that they make as a language. Really getting them to embrace that idea, because even though I consider myself having gone to pretty good art schools, I didn't really get that message explicitly. And when I started teaching, that was something that really struck me, that it is a language. And that's the thing that I most want to have ring true for particularly my younger students. For older students who already know this, I love to introduce technique, and so that's what my printmaking classes and my workshops, that's what I do in my workshops, is I offer people new ways to make their art.
Great. So you're giving to your students, and are you receiving anything in return from the experience of teaching? Is there anything that kind of opens up for you in the process of sharing these things?
I think interacting with students, it always brings up the idea of, well, it brings up the idea of communication, right? Not only are we working all collectively in visual communicating, but we are communicating. And so it always, I'm constantly being taught that the way you communicate, and particularly when I'm trying to communicate about these ideas or even the techniques, it teaches me how to communicate, basically. And it's a very reciprocal, relationship. So I think that's what I get out of, they can be very surprising. They can be challenging. And it's always a learning process for me, how to get to people.
Great. Okay, so you began in sculpture, and we're going to begin in sculpture also. So there's a series of images here of works that you've done, sculptural works that you've done. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about each piece, and also a little bit about what, where you were at that time, and what was really interesting you and driving you. Because this is distinct from printmaking and collage now.
Well, where I was at the time was I fell in love with the way that materials speak to us. Every material has something that it says, and especially when you combine them, and then you combine the materials together into potential imagery or things that evoke ideas or forms for people, then people bring their own ideas to the work. That's where I was when I was making sculpture, is how that combination of image and form and materiality evokes something in the viewer. And that would be the same statement for all of my sculptural work, I would say.
How about this one in particular?
Well, I think one of the other things was I always wanted to address the viewer's body when they approached my work. It was less conceptual and more physical. Like, where does this thing that you come up to, where does it meet your body? And how might you access? You could actually, in this particular piece, it's made out of steel and wood, and you could actually, though most people didn't, you could actually tip this down so that one edge was on the floor and step into it and kind of rock and walk into it. So you could physically interact with this thing. And it was about the body, really.
Great. What's it called?
Cradle.
Cradle.
For
Okay.
obvious reasons.
And this piece?
Again, it's how does the piece relate to the viewer, or how does the viewer's body relate to the piece? This is called grip. It's cast aluminum, and that form is, the aluminum form is hollow. And for the exhibition, it was filled with ice cubes. And when you have a cold glass of water with ice in it on a hot day and it sweats, that's what would happen with this piece. And so it was very, very physical, very tactile. The opening at the top was at about mouth height. And again, it's a relationship to the body.
And people could touch it and feel
Yeah.
the cold and the cold metal and such.
The wetness, you know.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. And
This is, again, going back to the body, these tubes, these long tubes are about 6 feet in length.
Mhm.
What you can't see is that each of the tubes is filled all the way down with soil, like compost soil. And at the top of each tube is a collar that I hand forged. And you could see the little mound of the soil at the top of the tube. The whole thing was approximately 10 feet, something like that. And the way that these tubes moved, because they're heavy, they were filled with the soil. And so the way that they moved was very, you could just press up against them and feel their heaviness, and you could move in around them and feel their heaviness against you. It's called love.
So all of these pieces to this point are about physical interaction
Even if the viewer didn't go and physically interact with it, because we're taught not to touch stuff, not to touch artwork. The fact that you could think about interacting with it was part of it,
And you were literally constructing all the components here, right?
Correct.
So hand forging the collars with the hooks and just building it. So you had a tremendous personal physical reaction. This wasn't like you were farming these things out to a group of assistants, right?
Nope. And the thing was, is that in some ways, the way this came about was I was in Seattle, and Boeing had a salvage place. And they had all these cool materials from manufacturing airplanes. And those tubes came from, I was wandering this place, and these tubes were there in a big pile. And if you got up close, you could see that they're stamped with a number. I have no idea what the tubes were. So the tubes are a found object.
So this is pretty amazing. So anybody could go there, or
yeah.
Wow.
Of course, it was a favorite destination.
Yeah, imagine. That's awesome.
Propellers and all sorts of cool stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. So this one.
So this sort of came around after the love piece. And obviously it was informed by the shape of those tubes, which I really loved. This is about 13 feet long. And both ends, you can't see the other end, but both ends are hollow. And you could, they're about, if you were standing up, the hole there is like about your chest. And, of course, it's the idea that you could physically interact with this thing. So you could actually interact with it. If you put your hand in that tube, you would feel in this particular end, you would have, again, more soil. And the other end was just open. There was nothing in there to touch except like the folds and the inner parts of the tube.
What did the soil represent for you?
That's a really good question. I used it quite a bit, and in pieces that we're not going to look at. I think it represented some elemental life material, and not like scatologically, more like growth medium in a way. I'm not exactly sure. it was like the sense of it and the smell of it, you know, the earth part of it.
Do you still use earth in any way in your current art?
Well, I'm really drawn to ash. I'm really drawn to charcoal bits and pieces from the fireplace. I don't use soil so much anymore, like directly like this.
Hmm.
Although there may be soil in my future.
Okay. Here we'll go on the next one. Oh, wow. So what's going on here?
So this is quite the departure. This is a cast of my hand, and this is way more conceptual, although it was another interactive piece. I did quite a few pieces that were kinetic, and this was one of those pieces. It's called Rock, Paper, Scissors, and the viewer was invited to, again, like the pieces were mounted on, this is life size, it's my hands, obviously. And they're mounted at about where you would naturally reach out and touch something if you're standing up. Like if you were going to shake somebody's hand, that's about the positioning of them in space. And they were mounted on poles that were anchored to the floor and to the ceiling in the gallery. And they were geared at the top of the poles. There was a gearing system, so that when you turned any one of the hands, they would move in a geared ratio to each other. And so that they would play the rock, paper, scissors game, you know, with the viewer, in a sense. You know, they were playing, the hands were playing with themselves, but the viewer was the person who was making the thing move.
I love that there's 3 hands. You know, we only have 2, but you've given us 3.
Well, they all had to do, you know, they had the combinations always had to
Right.
do something, right?
Yeah.
For the game. They're cast bronze, by the way.
Wow. So you cast the bronze, the whole thing? Wow. Okay. It's impressive. And this one?
Well, this was more of like a process piece. I built the wire cage thing. It's like a cone. So it's narrow at the bottom and wide at the top, and it was tied and soldered wire, heavy gauge wire. And then I wrapped the whole thing with fabric that was dyed, and then I torched it. I burned it. I'm really interested in how process is made. It shows itself physically in the work, whether it's 3-dimensional or 2-dimensional. And I just love, you know, well, fire is so much fun, right?
Right. So in all the previous works, there's an invitation for people to experience the piece in some way, physically touch it, move it, climb into it. And, you know, that invitation, like you pointed out, is very challenging. You know, it's a challenge to people.
Yeah.
It's very kind of provocative in a way, you know. It seems open and welcoming, but it's also challenging. You know?
That was the point, you know, it was really about making people, and there's many pieces that aren't in here that were about making people move their body in order to engage with the work, even if they didn't actually touch it. If they had to move in some way to experience it, you know.
Right.
This one in particular moved itself. It was more of like, it was hung from a single strand of rope, and so it moved it, you know. The opening of it, it's probably 5 feet in total height, And again, the opening, this big opening that you're looking at now, was about at your mouth height, the viewer's mouth height.
So all the pieces are sized and presented in relation to the body.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, like, people in a way couldn't really avoid it.
No, and in fact, it's this idea of sculpture, that things that are the size of our body almost kind of stand in for the body. It references our human body because it's our size. We have a certain kind of relationship with things that are our size, and as opposed to something that's smaller or larger. And that was part of what I wanted to talk about is, it's almost like a stand-in for another body.
Yeah, you were talking about the language of art that attracted you to work in this in this field, and it seems to me that this is about the language of the body, also, and but it's using art to speak directly to the body.
Yeah, and saying things that I don't know that I have language for. People experience things physically that are difficult to put into words, whether they're pleasurable or painful, and maybe they're best left unsaid. Maybe they're better felt.
Right. Okay. So this piece looks like sculpture, but it seems to be, it's two-dimensional art. What is it about this piece here?
It's a drawing, and it was actually a drawing, a conceptual drawing for a sculpture. I ended up making the sculpture. The sculpture is made out of cast iron, which is sitting in my backyard right now. And I just really always loved the drawing. It's about 4 feet, 48 inches. And so, like, for me, this was one of my first larger drawings. And I liked that it could be two-dimensional, but because of the scale, it also had a relationship with my body. And it was something that I was kind of interested in thinking about and exploring.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
So you were creating very impactful, dynamic, like interactive work in a way. It was the invitation was there to interact in sculpture, and but there was some reason that you stopped. And I'm curious how you started to transition into more of a 2D art.
Location.
Okay.
Where you work has a big influence on how you work, I think. I mean, for me, once I graduated from RISD, I ended up moving around back and forth across the country to different teaching opportunities. And so, I kind of got into a space where I didn't have a space. I didn't have all my equipment that I had before. And so making large scale sculpture and hauling it into a U-Haul and paying movers to truck my stuff across the country a bunch of times, I just couldn't keep doing it. So I turned to my other love, which was printmaking, and painting along the way. And so I found some of the things that I could do, that I was really interested in sculpture, basically the materiality and the juxtaposition of material and form. I found that I could explore that very successfully in printmaking, in a satisfying way. And you know the joke about sculpture, right? It's what people trip over when they back up to look at the paintings.
Oh.
So so you know, and plus, you know, the thing about two-dimensional work is that you can have representational imagery in a different way than you can three-dimensionally, and that was always very appealing to me.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
There's so much that, you know, an image, right? An image, the picture tells 1,000 words, and that's no lie. And so being able to throw representational imagery into the mix of materiality, you know, color, line, shape, all the other elemental things about art was very enticing to me. So
Okay.
working two-dimensionally didn't feel like a you know, a something that I was just doing because I couldn't do large scale sculpture anymore. I fully embraced it.
Great. Let's look at the next one. So here it seems to be some kind of a bridge between 2D and 3D.
Definitely a bridge. There's three-dimensional elements in this painting, and it's also a collage.
And was there a story behind this painting?
Well,
I mean, this is the thing about getting into representational imagery. It kicks up associations in the viewer, and and people create stories.
yeah, and I'm in a lot of ways I'm interested in. I think a lot of artists feel this way, of putting the image out there in order to get the viewer to have some kind of reaction. You know, what do these elements say to you, the viewer? And the pink box in the middle is actually, it comes out towards you, and it also recedes back past the picture plane. And it's filled with a soft satin puffy materials. You know, part of it's a little bit like dropping a bomb at a cocktail party, like a word bomb at a cocktail party, to see what people do. And I'm also interested in like our cultural associations with, you know, religious sort of figuration. You know, people have relationships to these things, and I'm interested in getting people to think about what their relationships are.
Well said. Okay. And this next one?
Same as this. I see somebody wrote in the chat. Both of these paintings are about 48 by 48 inches. This one was, this took a long time for me to do. Again, it's like this juxtaposition of imagery, material. Again, it's collage painting. The gun is painted, the airplanes are painted, the houses are collage, the numbers are collage, the paper, it's sheets of music on the left-hand side, from Psalms, church music, basically, and a lot of redacted lines. What was it about? I mean, I would say that it's in some ways about redemption. But I can't exactly tell you what it was about, to be perfectly honest. It's about it's about the mashup of all these things is really what it's about. It's confusion and superiority, you know.
Yeah. In a way, the mashup it challenges our meaning making instincts, and yeah,
And that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in challenging the sort of like the linear meaning making that we tend to want to do.
okay.
And I want it to, I want to send the viewer to something, but then I want to like send it off, forcing them to be sent off to a different, like, what does that have to do with that, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you can't overlook that part. That's why the gun is pointing right at it. This one, again, there is collage in this one. Most of my work, most of my two-dimensional work has some degree of collage in it. The position of the body of the figure is what this work is about. You know, what does it evoke? What does it bring up? I wanted the figure to be in this very strange position. Is the figure male, female? We don't know. Is it pleasure? Is it pain? Is it ecstasy? Or is it death?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a very kind of painful posture or arrangement of the body. Yet there's this kind of beatific expression, you know, this very deeply inward, relaxed expression.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to get into some collage here. And I think there's a couple of things in this group of images. One is, you know, materiality. Also, there is quite a bit of texture and color in these, but there's also imagery. There's found imagery and language again, literal language this time, literal words.
Mm-hmm.
And there seems to be quite a coming together here. Maybe one of the bigger emphasis is on the materiality and texture in these pieces. And I was just wondering if you wanted to talk about this group of images.
Well, like I was mentioning when you asked about what happened to sculpture, all of that love of material language can happen in 2 dimensions, right? Who doesn't love an old book or fabric, you know, or bits of paper and detritus you find on the street, you know? I think we are so drawn to the combination of things. We're naturally, as human beings, you know, we make meaning, right? And I think we like to figure things out. We like to puzzle things out. And I think that's what collage really is putting things together almost like a visual puzzle that gets the viewer to make the connections. And it's a personal connection, right? It's your interpretation of a collage is going to be different from the person standing next to you. And that is one of the most wonderful things about, especially about collage, because it's very personally interpretive. You know,
There seems to be
things remind people of certain things in their own personal life, and I just think that's the beauty of it.
This group has quite a bit of fabric in them,
Mhm.
and very textural fabric. Um, and also, you've left these hints like this 4112 and a bit of a map or something like this, and words here and there.
Mhm. Yeah. All of
Mm.
them, all of them, a lot of that kind of thing, a lot of this language, a lot of people talk about it as relational to memory, how our memory, and even our dreams, of course, like they're all of these little parts and pieces that seem like they don't make any sense together. But when you're dreaming, it makes perfect sense in a way, and I think that's what collage does, at least the way I like to work, what I like to bring to collage or image making.
Collage seems like almost a bridge between sculpture and let's say printmaking, because there is still a materiality that's and there is a three-dimensionality to it, even in two dimensions.
Totally. Yeah.
And how long did you venture into this kind of collage?
Oh, the adventure is continuing.
Right. I mean, particularly around fabric and language and the heavier textures. Yes.
I would say that it all still is continuing. I continue to use language, or I think what I do is I go through phases where certain things are heavier, like heavier use of certain things than other times.
Mhm.
So these are from a few years ago, and so they're slightly different. A lot of these have printmaking as the basis of them, like not this one so much, but well, a lot of my collage work has printmaking as the backbone of it. I
Mhm.
start with the print and then I work into it as collage.
Great. So I believe this next image is pure printmaking.
It is, yeah. This is straight up monotype. It's a trace monotype. And for those of you who don't know what a monotype is, it's where you draw or apply the ink directly on the plate, a flat plate, with no texture in it at all, and you print that whatever that image is. And so it's a very fast way of working, and it also lends itself to it. You can do it straight up, one print, one shot, and you're done, or you can print over and over and over, and which is, again, that goes to my sense of materiality and process. Printmaking just is so satisfying in those, for those two reasons. The process especially can reveal a lot of things that you wouldn't expect.
So here, this group of images, you've introduced a repeating motif. Call it a chromosome. It's like a chromosome-like structure.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about this motif or this image and why you were enjoying working with it.
The chromosome type of thing came about because I was thinking about how your genes, your genetic hand of cards that you're dealt, is completely out of your control, and yet it influences so much of how you experience your life. you know, what color your skin is, how tall you are, your eye color, everything about you that's you genetically was something you didn't choose it. You know, wasn't a drop down menu that you could make decisions about, and yet it so impacts how you are in the world, how you're viewed, how you're treated in some respects, where you go in your life, where you can go, where you can't go. It just was such a huge idea for me that I played around with it quite a bit, and used it as sort of the anchor for a lot of the printmaking collage work that I was doing in this particular body of work.
It seems at first glance that there's a progression of, I guess, complexity here from these, this monotone.
Monotypes, yeah.
Well, monotone, monotype, yeah.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, maybe let's just start with this one. So what's happening here?
So the previous plate evolved into a different plate, and then I was cleaning the plate, which is a plexiglass plate, and I was erasing the image. And the idea of erasing the image just, I was like, oh my, this is a beautiful idea of erasing. And how do you know, the desire to maybe erase your own genetic situation, or the collective desire to erase other people's genetic situation. I just think that this is one of these images that says a lot in the very simplicity of it.
Mm, yeah, it's quite beautiful.
Thank you.
And then there's a shift to colors. So are these six, how do you make these? Let's put it that way.
All monotypes. These are shapes either drawn on with with a paintbrush on the plate, or using stencils that I make out of like a thin cardstock to get the shape to get the ink to go through the shape. It's playing back and forth, and these are printed multiple times. The image is printed multiple times, so that there's a layer, and then I print another layer, and then I print another layer. And a lot of my work in general either is conceptual layering or physical layering. And this is an example, and they get more complex, obviously. Yeah.
How predictable is this process?
Probably 15% predictable. And that's the way I like it.
So what's intriguing about that?
I mean, other than the obvious, that something that you have some degree of predictability so that you can get the ball rolling is quite appealing. And then where it goes after you push it over the edge is the thrill, right? That's what are you going to get when you turn it around, or you flip it the wrong way? You do it the wrong way. What if you do, you know how to do something and you do it all the wrong things?
I'm hearing curiosity, I'm hearing freedom, I'm hearing the invitation of inviting chance into the process.
Absolutely.
But that sounds like chaos in a lot of ways, but these are not, I'm not getting chaos from this. There is, what I'm getting is that there is experience and skill that supports that way of working. This is, in other words, experience and skill will narrow down the opportunity for what can result.
well, and things, you know, I think skill can kind of keep it on the rails. It's like the roller coaster, right? Like, think of the crazy roller coaster that you've been on, and even though it seems like chaos, like the emotion that comes up from it is chaos and fear or excitement or whatever, you're always in the track, no matter how
Nice.
crazy it gets.
Yeah, I like that. And so this one, we introduced quite a bit of texture, but that's like a screen that's been printed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here, this is more than just printing.
Well, this includes, the next three pieces include Collage, which is just a fancy French way of saying that you include collage work during the printing process. So the piece, that reddish shape, is a piece of, actually it's an old piece of a print that I tore out. And then it's included in the process of printing. So you can see that it's printed over. And it's just, again, collage, but it's collage in the process of printmaking.
So you basically added another element and another, I won't say unknown, but opportunity for something new. Right?
A layer.
A layer. There you go. Yeah. A literal layer.
Yep.
Multi-dimensional. And it just seems like there's a building of complexity in this, with this image. Complexity of materials, complexity of process, complexity of imagery. Yet you're still holding this motif, this chromosome theme here.
I'm about to leave this, so on the next group, we were leaving the chromosomes behind.
One more. And what's happening here, process-wise?
Same process, overprinting, including some collage work or Collage. And again, just playing with layers. This one actually has, now I've started painting on top of the print after it's done. So I'm painting with gesso, drawing in with some pastel. Yeah, I think that's what's going on in this. You know, sometimes it's hard to remember what all happened. There's so much.
How do you know when to add another layer, another process?
Because it might need it. That's like asking, you know, how do you know when the thing is done? That's the mysterious question.
Yeah, very impressive. So in your design work, you're known for color.
Yep.
You talk about how you choose colors for this work?
Well, you know, a lot of it is, of course, you know, color has its own vast and complicated language, and colors bring up things in people, feeling in people. And this red on this one was the driving factor of this whole thing. And that's that sort of dried blood kind of color. Yeah, just, I'm not sure.
Intuitive in many ways?
Yeah, yeah, really very intuitive. Kind of like, what's the color? What is the feeling of the color that I want to get to? And then I work around that.
Kind of getting a sense of a decisive intuition or a directed intuition.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
In all aspects of the materials you're using, the processes you're using, the colors, the textures, all these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. So one of the things that's remarkable to me about this is this texture that's in the blues particularly. It looks like scratches or something to me, or lines.
It's scratches. Yeah.
Okay, and
This is a monotype, so it's inked on a plain plexi plate with rollers, brayers, and then it's just a surface of ink that you can then scratch into, draw into, wipe away, of course, to create this depth and texture. I love language, and so there's some writing that you can't read in here. That's always kind of an interesting, again, it's like a conceptual layer.
and is this this looks like a number, maybe a 2 or upside down
Yeah,
5.
number forms. Yeah.
Let's see if words and numbers,
Yeah.
and there's like this depth to them, foregrounding, backgrounding.
I was thinking a lot at this whole series. If you keep on this, I think there's four of them in the show here. That was this group was about like the multi-layered experience that you have when you're in the city, and things are close, things are middle ground, things are far ground. And there's always a combination of like language and visual and texture.
Yeah, they do have a cityscape feel to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think this one feels like buildings, or even an aerial view.
Mm-hmm.
And this one looks like buildings.
Yeah. That feeling of when you're on the subway and another car is going opposite of you, and that sort of filmic or that sort of cinematic kind of feeling that you get, like the frames moving by. A lot of this particular series was kind of feeling that sense.
Now this one stands out a little bit from the others. It's quite fascinating image for me. I'm guessing this is not just monotype.
Nope, it's not just monotype, although it started with a monotype, and then I worked into it with pastels and charcoal. Yeah, this is not city at all. This is, like the power of nature, kind of the
Absolutely, yeah. It has that dynamic quality to it.
sort of like the scary end of the power of nature.
So is the black the monotype printing aspect?
Yes.
And it's full of depth given by texture and tone, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The value change, right?
And then that's accentuated and modified with the color.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a great wave at sea or something. It's really beautiful. And here you've introduced in some more collage on the lower part.
Yep. It's it's part of, it's my great love, really, collage.
Yeah, it just seems like you're pulling on all your skills and all these materials and just applying them at will as you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of like you said, intuitively. Even in my newer work, which I feel like is sort of simplified, collage is obviously still ever present, really.
It's like sculpture being ever present. This one's much more serene today.
Yeah. again, started with a monotype and then worked into with gesso and collage and pastel
Right, lovely.
shapes, monumental shapes.
So how large are these pieces?
Most of this work is probably, anywhere from, some of them are quite small, 5 by 7, and some of them are 18 by 24, something like that. They're on the small side.
So how do you determine size? Or does size matter?
Well, most people would say the size matters, but I don't know. I think that you can achieve a lot in a small space, and you can waste a large space. And so, I think in terms of working smaller, you can work faster. Sometimes when I go up in scale, I struggle a little bit with making it feel like important. And that's something that I'm actually working on now in my work, is like, I want to get bigger. I want to go back to that feeling of working large that I had in my sculptural work. Then a lot of concepts about like taking up space. That's,
Yeah, I'm getting a real sense of kind of spanning these size relationships, from room size installations to, more intimate.
teeny tiny.
Yeah. And and then this just kind of encompassing all these different skill sets, processes, materiality. It just seems like you're pulling on so many different things all the time.
And that's the juicy stuff. That's my happy place, is working with materials. And I'm currently looking at my encaustic setup there in the near the windows that I can look out over the Hudson. And I love the language of materials. That's what drew me in the beginning, and that's what continues to draw me. I'm also working on a large scale wood block print currently, that's going to be printed at an event called Big Ink in June in Connecticut. And that's I just can't wait to get my chisels in the wood and to carve, right? Because wood block printing is about carving the image in wood. And I'm so excited to get started doing that. And it's quite large, it's larger. It's not as big as I would like to go, but it's moving in the direction. So.
Is that where they use a steamroller as a press?
That's one of the techniques that they use to print the big blocks.
Wow.
I think that they've built a press that can handle a 40 by 96 woodblock print. So wow. I'm not going that big, but yeah, maybe next year.
Cool. Okay. So this is another one in that series.
I think we're going to want to leave some time at the end for some questions too.
Okay. So this is a group of images from a sketchbook. And I just wanted, if you could talk a little bit about why a sketchbook.
Sketchbook is the place where you can play and nobody can hear you. You don't have to show them to anybody. They don't have to be good. They can just be it's, we all doodle, right? You're on the phone with somebody and you're doodling. And that's essentially what sketchbook work is. It's a chance just to play, this is this part of my hand, just play. It's play.
Mhm.
And nobody has to judge it, and nobody has to look at it except for right now.
I'm curious about this material.
This is really cool stuff. Scratch, it's like a lot of people know about this, and it's this black paper that's coated, and you scratch into it and you get white lines. Some of it, sometimes you can buy the colored version, but it's a manufactured paper. You can make your own, of course, by we did some experiments where we smoked the paper, or the material that we were working with, and if you hold the paper over a flame, like a candle flame, and the smoke that comes off of that, it'll smoke the surface of the material, and you can then scratch into it. It's basically the same idea of this.
It sounds like nothing's safe, I mean, in terms of like what you got around the house, it's like anything can be pulled upon. That's
Yeah,
great.
which I love. Yeah.
So these are collages, they're drawing, they're painting, they're
Everything.
they're
They're play. It's
Yeah.
just play.
And why do it?
Because you have to to be able to make stuff and put stuff together that's really of very little consequence. If everything is precious, if everything matters, then I think that's an inhibiting, it inhibits you. And so if you have a place, and I always recommend this to people, is you really should have a place that you can just, it's like being in your bedroom in your pajamas and nobody's around, and you can binge, Netflix, and you don't get any grief from anybody. And this is what a sketchbook is. It's that place that you can just do whatever you want to do. And there's no sense of gravity, right? You don't have gravity to contend with.
So failure is not an option because it doesn't exist in this. And
exactly. Exactly.
And can you do draw upon these for ideas or inspiration?
Yeah.
So these things that are just kind of coming through you,
Yeah.
without.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Sometimes the sketchbook is where you can work out ideas that you would think are like abhorrent, or things that you're not supposed to look at or put together,
Yeah, like all the little voices in our head that say, well, you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't put those two things together.
Yeah, don't make prints with the end of your hand, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's that place.
This one's quite intriguing.
Well, this I took, this was a found object. a found photograph of yours, actually. And I was heavily into knitting and sewing for quite a while, and I love reintroducing that material into my work. And in the last couple of years, I've been doing that. So it's collage, it's stitching. Yeah.
It's very fresh, very fresh.
Thanks.
So we're getting into some newer work here.
Yes.
And
maybe we could just go through these pretty quickly.
okay, these have a very different feel in terms of form and in terms of density, perhaps. Different way of dealing with density.
Mm-hmm. And the newer work is a lot more about like going back to form, real concrete form, and letting the language of a form or a group of forms, along with texture and color, to carry the message, or evoke evoke something, and really simple forms, the sort of elemental forms.
Yeah, it seems like the ellipse or the sphere. This looks like a rather complex, a sophisticated application here.
Yeah, this is print work using a technique called collage, where basically you create a plate out of, you can create a plate using any thin material, but it has textures applied to the plate. And the way you ink up the textures will print in certain ways, sometimes in unexpected ways. So this is a combination of Shinkolay and collage, collage printing.
So there's this repeating shape, this oval or this orb shape, and across so many different ways of rendering.
Yeah, and there's some stitching in those guys.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering about your attraction to this form.
It's elemental. It's like the shape of our head, right? It's a shape that we're just so like intimately familiar with. It's the shape of eggs in a, it's just such an elemental and fundamental shape that I believe as humans, we're really, really drawn to it. I'm drawn to it.
Yeah, it seems related to the body, or like the torso also.
Yeah, yeah.
So here we get into more of like a pure collage. Although some of these things are created through printing.
Well, I print the elements and then use them as collage.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And is there anything you'd like to say about this work? Whoop. Well, there's this one's.
Yeah, you can keep going. These are all sort of in that same vein of using printmaking, collage. In this particular case, there's hand stitching. It's the materials put together in layers, form, color. What do they say to the viewer? What do they bring up in the viewer? There's not a concrete, there's no concrete thing that I start with that I want to make a picture of. It's really about the way that the work evolves. And I start with like, I have a shape, or I have a texture or something that I want to start with. And then the work tells me what it wants after that. That's very common way of artists working.
These are very complex and rich images, these two.
There's a lot of layers.
Layers. Okay, here we get into pure collage again, almost.
With parts that are made with printmaking. Yeah.
Printmaking and painting, perhaps, it looks like.
Yeah, there's painted papers in this. Shapes that are cut out of stuff.
Seems like the texture is so much more, it's still there, but it's softened quite a bit.
Yeah.
And simplified.
That's the piece you see behind me.
Right.
Collage, printed material in collage. Same. You can see that I'm sort of simplifying things, I think what I'm trying to go for in a lot of my current work is more like simplification, elemental sensibility.
Yeah, I can just feel like you're pulling on all that past work that you've done, all that experience, all your versatility with process, and kind of representing it in a distilled form.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this is different. What's going on here?
So what some people know is that you and I have been collaborating, and that doesn't always mean that we are making a piece together. That sometimes means that we are working alongside each other. And of course, I'm seeing what you're doing, you're seeing what I'm doing, and we have parts and pieces on the table, and we can draw from like a collective table, and that we both brought material to, and so that has been a real shift in my creative process. I've never collaborated with anybody, and it really is quite an interesting opportunity to do that. You learn a lot, obviously.
Yeah, and what are the components of this image?
Photographs from the table, from your cutting out a lot of your photographs, and then putting on tape, and there's some mica in this particular one. There's drawing on this one. Again, it's collage, and the whole idea of working with like all of these things are sort of found materials. I love the idea of the found material, or the found object, and how it brings its own special thing that it calls to you, right? You see something on the ground or on the collective table, and for some reason, maybe you cannot put that into words. It makes you want to pick it up, and it has something it says to you. And
again, it seems like this language is no language of association now. It's like bringing words into almost a poetic phrase.
Yeah.
Not literal.
Yeah.
Very evocative.
Thank you. Are we gonna have some time? I know some people have questions.
I'll go much quicker. And these quickly?
These are working actually on these negatives that you laid out on the table for me to work on. And so again, it's a found object that has information already embedded in it, and layering on material, tape and paint and drawing, it changes the thing from, it's still the original thing is still embedded in it, but now it's got an overlay of other things.
And what size are these?
These are actually quite small. Well, no, these we printed out very large, 24 by 32, I believe. And so they're printed out and then worked on top of again. So they get their Polaroid negatives, and then they get worked on at this scale, and then they get printed out large scale and then worked on again. So again, there's like tape and collage and painting.
Seems like layers to the fifth power or something like that.
Layers. We love layers. So are we gonna open up our,
Yeah,
open
this
it
is the last, this is the last one. So if you're interested in contacting Joan or looking at her Instagram or her website, she has a brand new website. Still not completely finished, but it's quite close with contact information. Okay, I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
stop the share. It's a funny thing, I can't see my cursor. Okay, that worked. Did I stop the share? There
No,
we
you
go.
did.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
So Doug, do you want to moderate questions or do you want Charles to?
Well, the idea was to have Charles look at things that are in the chat. Invariably, what happens in the chat is people are telling you they love you. The work is fantastic.
Yes, 2 layers, yes.
Yeah. But I would say that that was a very nice interaction between the two of you. It was well played, well prepared.
Thank you.
That's a comment, and I learned some new things along the way.
Good.
Yeah, I love that last batch of work in particular,
Hmm.
where you are right now.
Thank you.
And I give you one question I have, which is, because of the nature of how you're manipulating or changing the surface in because you're doing so many things that are monoprints or with a collage element and or maybe some other media thrown in. You don't really do series, do you? I mean, so much. I mean, you don't do like a print series of say 40 of something or 50 of something. Yeah.
No,
Rare.
even though I'm working in a very traditional medium like printmaking, where the goal of printmaking is to make multiples of the same image. I have no interest in
Multiples.
multiples of the same image. No, I'm much more, my sensibility is much more like, a painter or a sculptor in that sense.
So I wasn't familiar with this Big Ink project. Is that something fairly new, or has it been around for a while?
It's been around for a while, yeah. They do
But
it all over the country.
But the idea, once you start doing something, I don't know if you're going to work to 96 inches, but once you start doing something on that kind of scale, it really would transcend into a kind of painting rather than a print. I mean, just by the nature of its presentation.
Yeah, and even though it is a print, it's the scale of that. Well, again, like it goes back to the body, right? You have an interaction with something, whether it's a painting or a print or a sculpture that's your body size. You have a different.
At 96 inches, unless you're Wonder Woman or the largest human found.
Yeah.
At the Big Ink, that's beyond human scale. But at say 5.5, 6 feet or something, that's more like human scale generally.
Yeah.
But that's an exciting idea. We toyed around with doing, I think we actually might have done a panel in the past called How to Make It Big in the Art World.
Like literally big?
Well, yeah, so it's facetious, but yeah, literally big. So the whole idea of scaling up the thinking process, and how you take things that might have been sculpturally, you'll say a maquette, and you can, working with a foundry or something, get it, or fabricator, getting it into something that's very large scale.
Yeah.
So too, in what you're doing, I look at many of these things and I say, oh, make that a painting. In other words, render it much larger.
Yeah.
It's exciting to see some of those.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
the same complaints. I mean, I do a lot of work that's 6 inches by 8 inches and things like that, which I think are gems, and are very complete in their own scale.
Yeah.
But all the time I get people saying, "Oh, I'd love to see that, 10 times larger, let's say.
Well, my joke is, if you want to make it big, right? If you want to have an impact, make it big. And if big doesn't work, make it red.
Make it red, yeah. Right, and then
I've
if you
heard
make it
that.
big and red,
Yeah.
ultimate
But
red.
I think people, I think there's some degree of our culture that is like bigger is better kind of mentality. And we all know, because we're all artists, basically all of us are on this panel are artists. We know that the power of the intimate thing, there's also a different kind of relationship to that,
Right,
there's an intimacy to small scale work that
right.
the bigger work doesn't have.
Uh-huh. Well, the abstract expressionists certainly got the message, and they were doing massive scale. And for the longest time, many women were working quite small, and men were working larger. And that, of course, has been completely, thrown out the window. So you take somebody like Julie Mehetru,
Oh God, I love her work.
doing things that are like, 25 feet tall by 35 feet wide.
Yeah,
Uh,
she's also a RISD grad.
uh-huh. Yeah, so yeah, scale is interesting. It isn't, obviously it isn't everything, but
Yeah.
it has an interesting dynamic.
Definitely.
In some of your work, I say, well, I would love to see that larger.
Yeah, me too.
Just a comment, Doug.
Sure.
This is Maxine. The reason the women were working small was they were doing it in their kitchens after the kids went to bed. So
Yeah.
it was completely, like you say, Joan, location, location, location. It's like
Right.
what we have available to us. And here in the Hudson Valley, you also look at, as artists, we also look at, well, okay, I could make a 60 by 80 painting. Does anybody have a house that could, fit it? Who's going to buy that? So it's going to have to sit in my studio for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
That's our reality.
Well,
Anyway,
something else
gorgeous
about
work.
something else about scale that I find interesting is that my observation of having participated in putting together, at least peripherally, something like 3,000 shows with thousands of artists involved, is that those who the people who are attracted to small scale also tend to be nearsighted, whereas people who are attracted to large scale tend to be farsighted.
Uh-huh.
Oh, it's hilarious.
Uh-huh.
By the way, Joan, I want to say this. I tuned in tonight particularly because you talked about the collage, and tomorrow I have a student who wants to learn about how to do collage, and before 6:30, I didn't know how.
Okay.
So
Lay it
thank
out
you.
on the table,
Yeah.
get your glue stick. Fantastic.
Joan, there's a question about, will you be giving a printmaking workshop at RDF in the fall? I'd love to take a workshop with you. Any comments about that?
It's not a printmaking workshop. It's really it's a workshop on how to use encaustic, their wax paint, and their paint sticks.
And if someone were interested in taking a printmaking class with you?
Woodstock School of Art.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's a couple of other venues that that come up every now and then. So
Let me jump in here and
I want
I
to just ask,
go
want to
ahead.
make one
Sorry.
comment before you quit. Hi, I'm Babs Reingold. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was wonderful to see all your different work. And I too play with all of the things such as sculpture and even printmaking. I've done lots of monotypes, but I'm doing a lot of large drawings and combining drawing and sculpture.
nice.
But I just wanted to ask a comment or two, or make a comment or two about the monotype process and the act of experimentation, because it's such a wonderful process that you can really play around. Are you using the encaustic as a resist? Are you using the encaustic on top of? When you're done, do you use it? Like I use it to heat into paper, and I make stain paintings. And I do these stain paintings that are kind of in a weird sort of way. I started thinking about your presentation. They remind me of the old days when I was doing monotypes, because they have that same interaction that's happening. There's this surprise element. There's always a bit of a surprise element because you're lifting it up and you're not sure, even though you're making these marks and you're playing around with the materials. So I was just wondering if you take the encaustic and use it at all as a resist, and how do you use it?
I've never used encaustic as a resist. I've only used it as an application on a print. So I will make a print using a traditional method, whatever it is, collograph or lino cut or whatever the thing is, and then I will work on top of it with wax. Yeah.
Okay. So you use it as almost like a coating, and are you using all these different colors with the encaustic? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
I use it. I was gonna say I make my own encaustic, and I use it, like I said, I heat it into the paper, and you can create this resist with heating it into the paper. So,
yeah, that's really interesting. I've never tried that before. And then you print on top of it?
I stain on top of it. I have this rust and tea staining method that I developed totally by surprise, how I got doing it. And then I've honed it and developed it. I started in 2000, and I started playing around when I realized, well, what if I wanted to make marks that were the different marks with the encaustic, and then what happens to the rest of the paper? Just like you would do this takeaway idea without also not knowing, depending on how much encaustic you put on, how much you heated it in, all of those were factors on how the stain would take.
Yeah.
And I would be kind of interesting. The same thing with monotypes, might do the same kind of thing. Anyway, just a thought.
Yeah, very cool.
Anyway, thank you, Joan Ffolliett. Thank you, Charles Purvis.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank our programming coordinators, Therese Chen, Miriam Deutsch, and Purnima Anand, and the rest of the programming committee, as well as our board, our advisors, our numerous volunteers and interns. And thank you all for joining us tonight.
Yes, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Good night,
Charles.
everyone.
Thanks, Doug.
You're welcome.
Bye.